Imagine it is 2015. You are standing on a street corner with a bus ticket in your pocket, a half-eaten bag of chips, and $2 billion in debt. No, this isn't the opening scene of a tragedy. This was the literal reality for a company called AMD just 10 years ago. They were ghosts. Dead men walking. And yet, here we are in January 2026. While their biggest rival is busy putting out literal fires in their own processors, AMD is building the engines for the most powerful supercomputers and AI farms on the planet. They didn't just survive, they staged the greatest comeback in the history of Silicon Valley. Today, we aren't just looking at chips. We are looking at a revenge story 40 years in the making, from a cheap clone to the undisputed king of the server room. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Silicon Clone. The Cowboy Era. Let's go back to 1969. While most tech founders were nerds in garages, Jerry Sanders, the founder of AMD, was a Hollywood-style cowboy in a pink suit. He drove a Ferrari, wore gold chains, and had a motto that sounded more like a rock star than an engineer. People first, products second. But there was one tiny, embarrassing problem. AMD didn't actually have any original products. For decades, they were basically Intel's shadow. See, back then, IBM was the big boss of computers. They told Intel, "We'll buy your chips, but only if you have a backup company we can buy from if your factory burns down." Intel looked around and chose AMD to be their legal clone. AMD was literally handed the blueprints. They released the AM8086, which was a bit-for-bit copy of the Intel 8086. They were the generic brand of the computer world, the store-brand cereal of silicon. For years, being an AMD fan meant you just didn't have enough money for a real Intel computer. They were stuck in a loop, until the student decided to kill the master. Chapter 2. The 1 GHz War. The First Byte. 1999 was the year the world stopped laughing. AMD decided they were tired of copying homework. They released the Athlon. This wasn't a clone, it was a beast. In the year 2000, the unthinkable happened. AMD beat Intel to the 1000 MHz finish line. Imagine the panic in Intel's offices. The cheap clone had just lapped them. Intel tried to cheat by overclocking their Pentium processors so hard they were practically screaming for mercy. But it didn't matter. AMD had the better architecture. They introduced 64-bit computing to the masses, while Intel was still trying to convince everyone that their weird, expensive Itanium chips were the future. This was the golden age. For the first time, you didn't buy AMD because it was cheap. You bought it because it was the fastest thing on the planet. But as the old saying goes, the higher you fly, the harder you hit the pavement. And boy, did AMD hit it hard. Chapter 3. The Bulldozer Grave. Bankrupt? 2011. Remember that year? AMD released a new architecture called Bulldozer. It was supposed to be a revolution. High core counts, high clock speeds. In reality, it was a disaster. It turns out, if you build a processor that has 8 cores, but each core is as weak as a wet noodle, you don't get a supercomputer, you get a space heater. Bulldozer chips were so hot and so slow that they became a meme. AMD's market share didn't just drop, it evaporated. They were bleeding money. Tens of millions every month. By 2014, the company was worth less than the land their buildings stood on. They had to sell their headquarters and rent them back just to keep the lights on. The only thing that kept them alive was a life support contract from Sony and Microsoft. If you owned a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One, you were literally paying to keep AMD from going bankrupt. They were on their last breath. And that's when a woman with a PhD in electrical engineering and a titanium spine walked through the door. Chapter 4. The Zen Awakening. The Savior. Enter Lisa Su. When she took over in 2014, people thought she was captaining the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. But she had a plan. She stopped all the side projects and bet the entire company on one single idea: Zen. In 2017, Ryzen was born. But it wasn't just a fast chip, it was a complete rethink of how to build computers. See, Intel was still building chips like giant, single diamonds. If there was one tiny crack, you had to throw the whole diamond away. Lisa Su said, "Let's use Legos." They called them chiplets, small, cheap pieces of silicon that they could snap together to make a monster. This allowed AMD to sell 16-core processors for the price of an Intel 4-core. It was a bloodbath. Gamers came back in droves. Creators came back. Intel, who had been lazily selling us the same 4 cores for 10 years, suddenly found themselves in a technological knife fight. And they forgot their knife. Chapter 5. The Server King. Epic Dominance. But here is the secret. You don't become a trillion-dollar giant by selling gaming CPUs to teenagers. You do it by owning the server room. This is where AMD truly broke Intel's back. Look at the state of things in January 2026. AMD's EPYC processors are everywhere. While Intel was struggling with factories and stability, AMD launched the Venice generation. 256 cores on a single socket. Can you even imagine that? One single epyc chip can now do the work of an entire rack of older Intel servers. Because of this, the giants, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, are making the switch. AMD's share of the server market has blasted past 40%, and it isn't stopping. Every time you search something, every time you stream a movie, there is a massive chance a red heart is beating behind that screen. Intel didn't just lose a race, they lost the keys to the kingdom. Chapter 6. The AI Throne. The Future 2026. So, is the war over? Not even close. Because in 2026, the battlefield has moved from CPUs to AI. While everyone is looking at NVIDIA, Lisa Su is quietly building an army. The AMD Instinct MI400 accelerators are now the only serious competition for NVIDIA's dominance. AMD is moving to 2-nanometer production and integrating AI directly into every laptop and handheld on the market. They aren't the clone anymore. They aren't the budget option. In 2026, AMD is the architect of the future. They survived the bulldozer grave, they climbed the Zen mountain, and now they are looking down at everyone else. The Silicon Cowboy would be proud. The Green Shadow. It is an incredible story, from zero to hero. But don't get too comfortable, because while Intel is down and AMD is celebrating, a green giant named NVIDIA is doing something that could make the very idea of a CPU obsolete. They are building a world where the processor doesn't even matter anymore. Is AMD ready for a fight where cores and gigahertz don't count? We are going to find out. Click the next video to see how NVIDIA became the actual ruler of the planet, and why even Google is terrified of them. What's in your PC right now? Red, blue, or something else? Let me know in the comments. See you in the future!